This is Clyde, and he was one of the workers in Los Alamos, was involved with the people that were developing what we talked about last period, and those men talked about how the atomic bomb that was dropped ended the war and saved many people's lives. And I told you to listen to that because the modern snotty-nosed journalists try to turn us against America and against all these things that happened. But here's a person that was working with the project from the ground level up. So he's going to talk to us for a few minutes and then open it up for questions. So Clyde, take it over.
Thank you. And welcome to my conversation. I can talk for hours about this, but we don't have that much time. And so my general things, I've been coming here for 10 years and talking to you people, students and adults. Who else? Adults. I think a lot of adults need to hear what I've got to say, or other veterans, because when I'm downstairs, I've already been a whole dozen times already this morning. But anyway, what I'm going to talk about is from the time I got to Los Alamos. Now, when I was selected out of 5,000 veterans in Washington, and Oppenheimer took only 2, he took me the second day, and there's 3 more. But I didn't know what I was. They were from Europe, and we thought we were going to go to work for the post office. Well, I know in 1 week there was no post office job in this thing, but I did not know what we were into or what anything. And they went through my hometown like a dose of salt, and my parents didn't even know I was in the States, not alone what happened to me. So that's another story, but they just ripped the things apart. And as of today, I'm still not recognized by the government as still alive. The federal regulations said from 1950 to 1970, out in the Pacific, where they did the testing, they are the atomic veterans. And I belong to the atomic veterans. But when I went to the convention in 2001, they wanted to know what ship I was on. I said, what ship? I didn't know anything about ships. And he says, well, the atomic veterans were out in the Pacific in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they're the atomic veterans. Oh, I says, well, fine, if they're recognized. And I says, I wonder, because the federal regulations that I have from Washington, and you can get the same copies, say that they are the sole survivors and they are the sole atomic veterans. But I got news for you. I'm the oldest one who works in Los Alamos. The federal government in 2004 and 5 now are beginning to come around. They now tell me I'm 100% radioactive. All my medical problems that I have to this day, and I've got them coming out my ears, they don't know what to do. They have no doctors that can do anything for me because of radiation. And that's 65 years ago. The president said in 2001 at Arlington on Veterans Day, at the end of his speech, after praising the Purple Heart, he says in his words, I just discovered 3 months ago that there are a group of veterans who have been morally mistreated and neglected and badly need of medical attention, and that's the atomic veteran with radiation. We do not know what to do for them. We have no medical procedures to do. And I'm going to recommend to the Congress that they get a Purple Heart. Now, at that time, that president had no idea I even existed. He's talking about out in the Pacific. He has not recognized any communication from a national organization or some other senators or congressmen I've met who took the stuff back, supposedly. I have not heard one nickel till to this day. I haven't seen a Purple Heart, and I'm only one. I could figure, well, gee, the president could at least afford to put out one. There is several 100,000. There's over 250,000 of the others, and it's probably closer to 5 because there were 35 to 40 ships with over 20,000 people aboard. Anyway, that is that. So I worked in Los Alamos making the atomic bomb with Bob Oppenheimer, who picked me out of Washington, D.C. And anyway, what I did, I was not in the lab. because we had between 700 and 800 foreign scientists that Dr. Oppenheimer had went out and handpicked. They're all from all over the world, but each one was picked for a specific project. As they completed their specific project, he put them together with somebody else that was compatible until in 45 come to the conclusion that we had a small bomb with everything in it that would be in the big one, and decided that we should drop it and see what happens, because they had no idea what they had, no idea in the world what they had. They didn't tell us. I never knew I was in that kind of shape until 2000. I've been living all my life this way. And no, I got all these medical problems, but I couldn't tell them why I have them. Now they know, but they don't want to recognize it because I'm still showing as dead. But anyway, make a short story short. That's good, and I have to swallow a little bit. I have a little problem with my voice box because they tell me I'm losing it. But anyway, where was I?
You were at Los Alamos and talked about how the different people have their
okay.
little projects.
Okay, I just need a little reminder because you have to excuse me for 85 and blind, so my memory is not, there's so many things I could talk about that I want to get just to a couple items. Anyway, in Los Alamos, the atomic veterans were radiation. I'm 100% now after 65 years. Can't believe it. But those that were out in the Pacific are classified as veterans, and there are benefits. There's benefits for being radiation and everything you can think of. Go to school, do everything. They're being treated like you can't believe. But how many know it? Right now, we have 110,000 that were out in the Pacific, and we know that's better than 300,000. I just talked to 2 more today that didn't even know about it, and they were in the Pacific. So we have got a real problem going around, and we're supposed to do it this year, but next year, hopefully we've got the money, and but we need the help. And so I'm having a documentary made, so next year you won't have to really listen to me. You'll see it from what was done, and it'll probably be on TV. Anyways, backing up. The test at Los Alamos in June 25 of 45 was 1,066. Now, why 1,066? Because all the little tests in between getting to this one, it was that many tests. Anyway, on the 45, we was out on the white sands in Los Alamos. On the railroad track, they had put an old locomotive that was in the 1800s, had the big smokestack on it. You probably read about it or seen about it. And there's a lot of iron in that engine in the coal car. Behind it, they had 7 prisoner box cars, which the military used to haul prisoners, and it's nothing but steel. Anyway, it was on a mile track, run right up to where they were supposedly going to drop this bomb. And I kept thinking, how are they going to drop this thing to land right in front of that locomotive? I knew they couldn't do it by air because they haven't been able to hit within a mile. The helicopter could maybe do it, but the helicopters in those days couldn't move fast enough to get out from under it. So what I found out 2 years ago by somebody who was there, that's how I get a lot of the information I'm telling you. It was a 900-foot tower in front of the locomotive, and the bomb was sitting on top of it. So when they dropped it, it blew things you can't believe. But I'll tell you this, of the locomotive, a small handful of metal, that's all. Of the boxcars and the rail, nothing. In front of the tower was gone, but in front of where it was dropped, and this will kind of blow your mind, the hole was estimated to be 1,500 feet deep, 3/4 of a mile across and 2.5 miles long. And it was covered with solid glass, top to bottom, 5 inches thick. Does anybody know why it's sand? Speak up, because I can't see you.
Because when
What?
when sand is heated up really, like high temperatures, it turns.
Well, I guess you've been doing your chemistry pretty good. Yes, what had happened is the heat from the bomb melted the sand, and that's where we get the glass. It is still there to the day, 65 years later. It's still there. I'm going down this fall, the next month, hopefully, or after the first year, depends on the weather and the air price right now, to see this. Now, I will be taken out there, and I can see from the trenches and see where everything is, because it's still undercover. In those days, the reason you don't read too much about atomic until after the 50s is because we were known as Manhattan District Engineers of Tennessee. That was our cover. There is a Manhattan District Engineers of Tennessee, and they are still alive, but they're working on all these new types of bombs and things, and they're doing it in Los Alamos. But it doesn't say atomic. It just says Los Alamos. And it's still there today. It's a big city with high rises, shopping centers, and I'm supposed to go see that, and I can't believe that it's there, but that's what they tell me. And in Albuquerque, we have an atomic archive that you can go in and see, and we're in the process of collecting all kinds of stuff from 1945 on up, especially that in the 50s. I mean 45 to 50. We're trying to get MacArthur signing the deal on the Missouri. Now, so far we haven't found any veterans that were on that ship. That was in the last of August, I think around the 25th or 26th, if I remember right. And there is nobody that knows about it, but we're trying to find out, because it's just like me. Until I showed up in 2000, they didn't know there was any veterans alive. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know, how much have I talked now?
You got lots of time. You
How
have
much?
lots of time.
How much?
About
Talk?
35 minutes.
35? Okay. I want to give you people a chance to ask questions, because there's a lot of things that you may have that I can answer, and if I keep talking, I may not get to your subject, because I could talk for hours about the whole program, and that's why I'm having the documentary made, so we can put it out on the TV and the television, whatever. And I will promise you that next year, if it's done, you'll see at least a 30-minute of it, so you understand. It'll be basically in the area of which I've talked to, about 44 to 55. And then if, I don't know what's going to be on how it's working. We're in the 5th day now, and but we've been almost a month, because the man that's making the documentary has to work and make a living. So this is being done pro bono, and so we still got a lot of money to have to be raised eventually. But anyway, maybe I should turn it over now, and then if you don't have too much, I can still talk some more. But I'll turn it over to anybody that's got a question. Yes?
I have a question. You said you're 100%
Radioactive.
radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, did you get that from that blast there in Los Alamos, that one blast? So at that time, they didn't know that there was going to be radiation? They just thought...
We didn't know that. We went through Geiger counters that told us when we were hot or cold, but it didn't tell you what it would mean. That was just I've been in those kind of, went through those kind of things before. I just told them if you were hanging metal on you or whatever, but it had nothing to do with radiation, because they didn't know how to detect it. They still don't know how to detect it.
So, so that one blast, you guys, you and others weren't far enough away to be...
Well, in my group, there's 7 of us. We're in the laboratories, because the lab still went on, and we were still moving the 2 articles that make the explosive part. They're in small bottles about this high, about yay big around. And you couldn't carry both of them at the same time. You had to carry one at a time. And you were checked from the time you picked it up until you got to the vault. You had so many minutes to make it. And if you didn't, boy, the place was ringing and everybody's wondering where the heck you are. But anyway, when that vault got full, then it was a good half a day that 10 or 15 of us had to literally move all those bottles out of that vault and take them to another vault, which was 3 times bigger than the one we were in. And after that, I don't know where it went, but because that wasn't in my department. But I can tell you that much. So that's what, I don't know if that answers your question
So
or
you
not.
got radioactive from the daily activity?
Working in the lab with Bob Oppenheimer's, handling the hot merchandise.
So not necessarily from the actual blast, but from just the daily.
Well, there was, the only blast there was is in 45.
Okay.
But I was in the lab, not out on the desert. I knew it was going to happen, and I knew I was 100 miles away, but we felt every inch of it. And we knew it blowed, but see, my job was in the lab, not out in the field or in the trenches looking at anything. My job was in the lab. So I get credit for being there because it's called Trinity Site. That's my national citation, Trinity Site. I've never had any children because of radiation. And those who did have children, because I got proof of that, it says in my citation, that they very seldom ever lived to be 5. And if they did, they were handicapped, maybe can't see, don't have no arms or legs, or they're all gone, or no fingers, or can't walk, or whatever. They're, in my estimation, they were a basket case. And a blessing that they didn't live any longer. Sorry to say that, but the kid was better off. But those who did live past it, when they got to 15 and 16 years old, they were unbelievable that they even lasted that long. But they're in wheelchairs, you have to feed them, you have to get them out, you have to do all these things, and they finally died. So now the wives who had those children, the last 3 years now, are showing up at the VA claiming that they've got radiation. Well, they couldn't help but not having radiation if they had their children because the husband was already radioactive and sure got it from them. So now they're trying to argue what they're going to do for them. They don't know what to do. That's another sad story. Anybody else got something to say? Because I got a few other items I could talk about. But I'd like to try to answer your questions to help you, because that's why I'm here.
Well, I was in World War II.
Yeah.
Also, but did you happen to notice when MacArthur was on the Missouri and the Japanese guys came up to sign the unconditional surrender deal?
Yeah.
He stuck his hand out to shake
Mm-hmm.
with the Japanese guy.
Mhm.
He thought better of it and he pulled it back.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there, but I have seen
But
some
you
film
never
on
see
it.
that anymore.
No.
No, because
No.
they didn't want
Well, first of all, you don't see much of that because just like my records, they're all tied up in Washington, D.C. since 45.
Yeah.
And the VA, the military, nobody can get to it, and they're trying to get to it because I'm having to prove that I'm radioactive and that I was there. I've got all kinds of proof, but the government's having a hard time chewing it, and the president is still saying we're dead.
Well,
So he don't know, and we even sent email to his personal file that we got the information. Never answered it. And I still say to this day, he does not know anything about it.
Well, I was in the little town of Walsass in Germany, and the war was over already. And on the bulletin board, they had a sign that says, or newspaper clipping or something,
Yeah.
that says, Americans bomb Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so what? They bombed Hiroshima. That didn't mean nothing to me. And then I started reading it, and it said it obliterated the whole town almost.
Well, it did.
Oh,
Still to this day, there's nothing there.
No.
They told me that in 5 years they rebuilt it. Well, I told the vendor that told me that, and it was only hearsay to him. I said, there's no way that can be done
It's
because
still radioactive.
it's still radioactive. When we tested in Los Alamos, it's still radioactive. Ain't nobody out there.
Sure. No.
And there ain't going to be no city, and there ain't going to be anybody there for quite a while. And the other thing is, there was a nurse in a nurse's hospital was there when they tested it, and she was still there afterwards. And their job was to go out in a Jeep and see if they could find anybody alive. Well, she got radiation, real bad, and the DAV's had it in the magazine, and there's quite an article on her, and they finally have recognized her that she hasn't. But they said, well, you may be 100%, but she ain't seeing much money.
Yeah, no.
And she can't get a Purple Heart because they said no, because there's no record. And they are supposedly be giving her 100%, but I haven't. The latest information is 204. She hasn't got that. She's getting compensation, but I don't know how much.
So why did MacArthur remove his hand? Just because?
It didn't look right.
Well, it's just like we're supposed to be friends. We're settling this thing, and thankful that you come and willing to sign, because we like to get out of this war because we don't think it's right. And he put out his hand to assure them that we believed in what we were saying.
Yeah.
But he was a little bit reluctant because they were still having great doubts what happened. They know we dropped the bomb and they didn't want any more, and they pleaded that please do not drop any more of those. So anyway, that's the only reason I can talk a little bit about that is because I've seen it on films that I've seen in convention.
But you won't see it anymore or any films. They don't show it.
I don't think you'll see that. We're hoping in the documentary that we make with the National Association of Atomic Veterans that we will have that. But in 2 years we haven't found anybody that was there. And of course MacArthur is long dead because he left there and they sent him to Italy and he was killed there. So that's another story. But anyway, for your information, we're on film, so let's talk up. Yes.
What do you think of it now? Because you guys brought in a new era.
Come again?
You brought in a new era of time, because now we're in the nuclear era.
Yes.
Because you developed the atomic bomb. What do you think of it now?
Well, you mean what the different bombs they have now? Is that what you're talking about?
You brought in a new era.
There is no atomic.
I know, but you guys brought in a new era of technology and such.
Well, the technology of making what we're doing now, I have no recollection of that because I've been not involved in that. They are doing it. That's where they're doing most of it, is in Los Alamos, at where we were. They've taken. It's a big city now. 10-story buildings, shopping centers, you name it, they got it. But no, as far as the ones that they're working on now, you have seen it on TV or documentaries from old public broadcasting and whatever, and you've seen all that. It doesn't make much sense to me. I know that some of it is pretty powerful, and it may be even more so than it is, but they're, in a sense, they've got it and they can use it and they can drop it, my understanding, which would be better than dropping the atomic bomb. It wouldn't be that drastic, but it would do a lot of damage. They're hoping it would do more damage to buildings and stuff like that and not people. You see, the ones that are taking the beating in this whole thing is the children. That's the sad part about it. The children are the ones that's getting killed off. And over in Europe and that, those kids by the hundreds of thousands a year are dying because no food, no nothing. But see, they may have some radiation from somebody, but you see, they had to be in Los Alamos or be out on the Pacific to get the radiation. Yes?
What made you want to join and be a part of the war?
Pardon?
What made you want to join and be a part of the war?
Oh, why did I join the Army?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's a good one. I joined the Army right out of high school. I went to military school every summer called CMTC at that time, and I graduated from that year. It was a 4-year course. We were there for a month every year. And then I joined the Army on September the 5th. I was in regular Army. I was in Kodiak, Alaska when they bombed Pearl Harbor in a regular Army. I was attached to the engineers. There was 37 of us. I've been in attachments most of my life, never in an organization per se. So that's when I joined in 1941.
Were you drafted or? was
No,
it-
I was in regular army. There was no draft when I joined. 1940, I mean. There was no draft until, was it late 41, early 42 was the draft. And I think it was 42 mainly. No, I was never drafted. And I served my first hitch, and I was still in Kodiak, Alaska. So there was no way to getting out. So I stayed there, and then I was, after the test in Los Alamos in July 25th, and after the dropping in August 6th and 9th, I was shipped out under secure orders. I traveled on troop trains and stuff with NPs guarding me. And they didn't know where I was going. There was just orders to go to a certain spot and be turned over to somebody else. And I found I wound up in Campbell, California, confined to military camp for a year. I had to go to G2 4 times a day. At night, the post-OD checked my bunk after 1 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning to make sure I was in my bunk. I was attached. They tried to ship me. It was a center where they were shipping the fellows out to replace. They were on shipping orders every other day trying to get rid of me. But they couldn't, because they couldn't find my service records. And I worked in a section. They finally got me. I was working in a PX and happened to do. Anyway, I got this job in the discharge center. Well, what it turned out to be, I would go in a car up to Reno and meet the troop train and take all the records off and put it in the van. And they would drive back, and we would get into the fort. I'll think of it pretty soon. Anyway, we get there about noon the following day. So when they walked in, and I was on the train for telling them what they could expect to get and have, like the telephones would be available, a whole big bank of that, contact with the bankers, or anything you wanted was there, email, you could talk home or whatever. And but I told them that you'll be out within 2 hours. Now the reason that I was able to tell you that is because when those records got back in an hour and 15 minutes later, they had a group of people going through those records. They made them out, they knew how much money they had the money, drafts for them, all the paperwork they needed made up of their time in service, and their travel pay and where they were going and so forth and so on. It was all there. So when they got there, it was just a matter of going through the line in alphabetic order. You know, that's the way the military works. So A's would be first and W's or Z's would be last. But anyway, they were out within 2 hours, 2 hours and a half at the most, unless they had a real problem with their service record and it had to be corrected. But basically they were out. And they come, because I was standing outside the commander and said, Clyde, when you were telling us on the train this, we couldn't believe it, because where in the world have we ever been treated that we could get out in 2 hours? You know, well, tell us that's the way it is. So that's another story. Anybody else?
So you went in the military when you were interested in it in high school. You were in the military before Pearl Harbor. A lot of them joined up after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
But there was something that drew you to wanting to be in the Army. Did you see a war on the horizon?
No, my dad was in World War
So you
I,
joined in
and he was a sergeant in the communication. He took the lines up to the front line, but he was never in the front lines. And he did that for almost 20 months. But he went to the American Legion, the different organizations. And I played in the American Legion Drum Corps of 100 pieces, a 100-piece band. I played in that. I played Legion baseball. In the high schools, we had what they call at the ballpark, knothole gang. Well, most of us were from the high school, And we played in, well, I played in those bands that played out in the parks and every summer. Hell, I was only 9, 10 years old when I started out in that. And we played a 100-piece band out in the park, free bonus. And, but then I also, in high school, so when this come along, why, we took the people that were in the high school bands and stuff, and got them to join us, and that's how we got going on the entertainment end, and that's why I got involved. No, I signed up originally for the Signal Corps, because that's, you know, basically what the telephone, I worked for the telephone company. And so that's what I did. But when I got to Presidio, Monterey, they said there was no such organization. So I sat there for 6 weeks. And finally, after about 10 days, the sergeant said, "Where did you learn all those right, left, and all that other stuff we had to do?" I said, "I learned that in military school." "Well, why in the heck ain't you out here doing it?" I said, "I'm doing it." He said, "Yeah, but why ain't you out here training them?" I said, "Well, I'm a recruit. You're supposed to be training me." He said, "You know as much about it as I do. I can't believe that you could do it." So he called the lieutenant over, and he said, "I want you to see what Clyde is doing." So he wanted me to take the troops and run them to their drills. And I did. And the lieutenant couldn't believe it. He said, "What?" He said he was in military school every month, every year for a month. Well, so I was out there on the parade ground every day drilling troops. Well, I went to a USO show over Fort Ord, Camp Ord at that time. It was in a tent, USO show. And they hauled us over there and back. There was no pay. Anyway, I came out of the tent and I looked up the street. And there was a big sign, 3 foot by 9, says 7th Quartermaster Transport. Well, that's what I was supposed to be going to. Not the Signal Corps, because it said there was no openings. But they sent me to that, and that's what was on my deal. So I went up to the office and told the first sergeant, and the lieutenant was officer of the day then. He come over and he says, "We've been looking for you for 3 weeks. Where in the heck have you been?" I said, "Over Presidio." "Well, we were over there every day. Trying to find you." "But they didn't tell me you were there." I said, "I was there. I was out there in the parade field." And I said, "That's where they found me too." And so anyway, they took me back to the tent, and the lieutenant and sergeant at noon, and says, "This man is ours. He's assigned to us. We want him." And they took me down and packed my bags and put me in the truck and took me over to the 7th Quartermaster. So that's one of the early stories about me. But whether that's interesting to you or not, I don't know. But no. I didn't. This here, I did not have any idea what we were on. They told us when we went through this screening that we're going to work for the post office. Now, I worked for the post office as a 16-year-old because we come from a small town and they needed help. So we'd go in and help to resort or deliver the mail in our town, did whatever. And I knew that it was no post office job. But I never knew even afterwards. And when I was shipped out, they didn't take me down to the railroad station in Washington, D.C. They stopped the train out in the desert and put us aboard the train. And I think there was 4 or 5 of us, but we were never in the same car. I never knew who they were. And but anyway, we were turned over to the MPs. And every time they changed NPs or whatever, they turned me over to another group. When we got to St. Louis, the troop train that we were supposed to be catching, we sat there for 4 days waiting for it. It never come. I even had a hotel key. I found it the other day. Anyway, we were living there in rations and quarters, and of course we ran a bar tab, but they charged that off. And anyway, Lieutenant comes, he says, "You've been here for 5 days," and he says, "We're trying to get your travel orders. We're trying to figure out where you're supposed to be going. We can't find out, so we're just going to put you on a train." Well, I don't know where the rest of them went, but I know the train that I was on. I was the only one on it. Turned me over to NPs. And I says, "Well, where are we going?" And he says, "I can't tell you." Well, I wound up in Sacramento, the middle of Oregon, not Sacramento. I mean, Oakland is close, because we did actually go into Oakland. Anyway, I was in Oakland, and I had been there before when I was driving and seeing. I know where that was. And I says, well, gee, I'm here, and I'm in San Francisco is what I was trying to say. And but I was on there about 12 hours, and the captain come by, and he says, you ready to go? And I said, yes, I'd like to get over this. I've been on the road for over 2 weeks. Where are you going to send me? He says, I'll put you on the first train going north. Turn you over to the MPs. So that's what he did. And I wound up in Sacramento. And they dumped me off the train, turned me over to the MPs, and the MPs, he says, well, what are we going to do with him? He says, well, that's your problem. You're supposed to know about it. So they went to headquarters, and then some officer, a colonel or something, remembered that they were looking for me, had been looking for me for 3 weeks. And they said, are you sure you got him? He says, well, he's got the right paperwork. So they hauled me up to Camp Beale, which is some 50 miles away at Marysville. And I was there confined to camp for a year, couldn't leave. So every 4 hours I went to G2 and checked in, and at night the OD checked my bunk. But I finally got transferred out and went into recruiting, into helping the guys come back from England, Europe, and that's where I started a while ago, and that's when I got picked up to go to Los Alamos, but nobody told me what we were getting into. I did not know. I'm afraid if I really knew what was happening or what was going to happen, I would probably checked out. Because they couldn't they couldn't give me any insurance if there was any problems. And I never heard of it, so I was leery. Besides that, I was waiting to get out, not get hooked into something else. But story of my life, I wound up there anyway. So, anybody else got a real bright question? Somebody must have something to say. Didn't you read about it in history books about the Pacific? The troops out in the Pacific on atomic?
I wanted to know, you talked about the troops out there that are 100% radiation, so...
Well, they're in all classifications, depends where they were and what they did.
So when, is that from the bombs that were dropped in?
Well, radiation, see, the Air Force is out there, and they flew through it. So those planes become contaminated. Then I found out 2 years ago that they pulled a drone through it about a mile behind with all the instruments that they had in the plane to verify what happened in that length of time. But I also found out, because I talked to one of them, they had a man in there. And all he was in his ODs. He didn't know nothing about radiation. Neither did anybody in the plane. Not only that, when they got through, they landed at the base and they washed those planes down. Now, all that water was contaminated because those planes are contaminated. They washed them down. It's the same thing with the ships. When they went through and they went back to port, the first thing they did is scrub down a ship. Can you imagine scrubbing down a big cruiser from top to bottom? But that's what they had to do every time they went out. So the thing is, are they radioactive or not? They had to be radioactive just for washing. Not alone if they're on the deck or whatever they did, the deck was contaminated, everything you had was contaminated. So it was pretty hard not to, so the government has recognized them.
So the radiation that they were sailing through came from the bombs from Hiroshima and Nagasaki? And it's that...
Well, no, not the bombs that were dropped there. That's a different set of bombs. These were another set of bombs before. Then we dropped, no, wait a minute, it's the other way around. It's the same bomb we dropped there, but then we still got about 60 or 80 of them still left that we can use, and they know it. So that's another backup, but that's not advertised.
You're talking about Bikini Atoll now?
Hmm?
Bikini Atoll?
Yeah. There are,
Island out there where they
I think there are 27 different, I was reading it yesterday. I have a closed circuit TV, that's how I read, but I can only see about 10 words or letters at a time. So it takes a while for me to read, but I'm able to read it. But no, there's about Well, they estimated at one time that I heard that there were between 25 and 30 ships on each one of those explosions. And some of the things I can tell you, for instance, in one, they had animals on board. They left them off in the islands and had them kind of staked out. And they dropped this bomb and they went back afterwards to see what had happened to these animals. Some of them were dead, no fur. Half of them, estimated, had no fur on one side. The other half had fur on one side. They're the ones that actually survived. The others were, pardon? What was you saying? But they were the only ones that survived. The cattle, whatever, the same thing. Sheep, you name whatever they put out. Chickens, half of the feathers were gone. The other half that were still there. Part of them were dead, part of them were not. If they lost all their feathers and whatever, they were dead. Why? You got any ideas? The government doesn't have any. Nobody has any ideas why, but they're still spending thousands of dollars trying to find out why. Okay, anybody else got something to say? I'm surprised you don't have more people that want to talk about it.
If you were to see Oppenheimer right now, what would you say to him?
Well, Dr. Oppenheimer died the last time he was in Oregon, and that was in 91 or 92 at a meeting. But I didn't know he was here. It was undercover. He was here for some reason. He met with some other dignitaries from the Pacific. And anyway, he was here, but he's long dead. So is what's it called, from Los Alamos. They're all dead. I'm the sole survivor.
Einstein have something to do with that too?
Pardon?
Einstein have something to do with
Well,
that?
he was one of those scientists that was in there. There was only 800 foreign scientists, and they were all of the elite group of the whole world that had some knowledge of certain things, and Oppenheimer went and talked them into coming into this project, and they got disposition to bring him in without all that hassle in customs. And got them in, but they didn't go anywhere else. They were right there, and they were housed right there. They were housed all together. They ate in the same place that they were sleeping in, so they didn't get out to the commissary or any other place. They never got anywhere except in the building, and I understood their barracks and stuff was about a block away from the building. So I don't know because I never seen it.
Yeah, well, he was one of the smart ones.
But we had a lot of smart ones. We had a lot of smart
Yeah,
ones.
but Einstein was one of the super.
Yeah, well, you know,
Super duper.
it's hard to fathom that of all those scientists, and they didn't know hardly anything in 39 and 40 when they started out, but Oppenheimer had the visions that he could make a bomb, but he needed the expertise of different people in different parts of making that bomb. He knew what his objective was, but how does he make it, or how does he get the job done? He knew part of it. He knew about making the stuff to blow it up with. That was no problem. He knew all about that. But you got to have a piece of equipment that's going to deliver it and going to set it off when you do. And see, that's another story. That I cannot talk about. In fact, I don't know nothing about it in the first place because I was never involved in it. But anyway, it's just one of the stories.
You said that you were not to be found because they didn't know where you were. What happened to your paycheck on all of that? Did you ever get paid?
Come again?
Did you ever get paid while you were?
Oh, when I was confined?
Yeah. When
Oh,
they-
well, yes. You see, the other thing at the discharge center in Camp Beale, it was a place where the troops were being sent out. Not coming in, they were sent out from there. And so I wound up on the travel orders about every other day or so, and then by noon or the day or what, it was scratched off. But you see, I was only there for ration quarters. They were trying to get rid of me because I'd been there for 3 or 4 months at the time. They wondered where in the hell and what have I been doing. But what happened was, I had to go to G2 4 times a day to check in. Then at midnight, the OD of the camp came around to my beck and checked on me up till 5 o'clock in the morning when we got up to make sure I was there. And that went on for almost a year before I finally got out.
Did you get paid for that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, I had to go to G2 and get paid, and that's what to everybody, this, where I was saying ration quarter, how do you get paid, or you got a bunch of money in your pocket we don't know anything about? I says, I go up to G2 and get my money. They take me over to the finance officer and I get paid. But in my medical records, it shows me leaving Washington, D.C., and it shows me being discharged. There's nothing in between. Nothing. It says nothing. That's why I'm having a problem. Not only that, the VA can't get to those medical records. They can't get to anything because they're locked up. They have tried. That's why I'm having such a problem, trying to prove. And that's just some of the things that I happened to them. One of those guys that a kind of pack thing, what do you call him, a pack rat? I packed everything I could think of with me because I knew one day I was going to have to answer who and what and where and why I was here. So I've got most of that stuff, and that's what I'm using. But,
What special skills? What special
skills did I have?
Did you have that attracted the Oppenheimer and those to select you?
Well, can you believe what I'm going to tell you?
I don't know.
I'm 21 years old. I'm a farm boy from Iowa. My father worked for the telephone company for 49 years. My mother worked for the Red Cross because she originally was a nurse. She worked there at the air base for 20 years. I graduated from high school. I went to military school in the summer. I graduated from there, and I signed up in September the 4th. As far as any education in chemistry or all of those things, I didn't have any. That's what bothered me the most. But he picked me out of the second day. The main reason, and it still is to this day, how many young people can pass security regulations today? You got to have a squeaky, squeaky clean record. And if FBI congratulated you in February, says, Clyde, you're one of the few that's got a perfect record, and we congratulate you on that. There are many that got those positions, or maybe not as high as mine, but in others that were taken away from because they've been involved in whatever. You couldn't even have a driving ticket. You know, so it's pretty rough. But as far as any special training, I didn't have any. But he just figured what I was going to do, which didn't require me to be a physicist or a chemist to do what I was doing. But he needs somebody that would pay attention to what he's doing, because if you made one misslip and somebody got a hold or got involved with whatever I was taking out or putting back in, they could be in deep trouble.
Back to Brian's question. If Oppenheimer, if he were alive, let's
Yep.
make it hypothetical. If he were alive now, is there anything that you'd like to address to him? What would you say?
Well, I had a chance to say that before I left, because he asked me to come in, and I went in and told him. But you see, at the time, I didn't know then what I was involved in, except it was tight, and I was making theft. I knew I was in a chemical lab. I knew we were making things. I had a sergeant that I become acquainted with that originally came on the same group that I did from Washington, D.C., and he was a sergeant in the regular engineers. He'd had almost all his time in, and he was trying to get out. He thought this would be a place to get out, but he says, looks like I'm going to be here a couple more years before I get away. But he was in the ordnance, and he was making shells. Well, I can tell you this much, those shells were not like this. Those shells were as big as 2 of those tables put together or more. Monsters. Take a special forklift to even pick them up. I know that. So they're in sections. He made the sections Then they had to be welded together. And then the guts had to be put in them, and then finish welding together after they got it all done. So it's a long, long project. But I never seen any of that. All I know that he worked there making the time. The one thing I can tell you, when I was in Washington, D.C., I was stationed at Fort Belvoir, and I hung out in Alexander, Virginia at a tavern, which was up the street from the torpedo plant, where they actually made torpedoes. Well, I become friends with a fellow that could have been about my father's age at the time. And he took a liking to me. So one day he says, Clyde, on a Friday, he says, how would you like to go down to the torpedo plant? Well, it'd be great. I don't know what I'm going to see because my understanding is it's pretty much under security. He said, come on with me, I'll take you down there. So first of all, I went through the door and he had the key. So I figured, well, he has to have something. And we went through, and I spent 3.5 hours going through that torpedo plant. There isn't one thing I did not see. I seen them making it, I seen them making the fluid, I seen them how they put them together, I seen how they tested them, I seen a whole ball done. And I went through an awful red doors with closed to security, number so-and-so, so-and-so. Not everybody could get through the same doors. And I'm saying afterwards, God, what did I get myself into? So as I'm walking up the street, he knew I was quite disturbed because all of a sudden I had clammed up and I wasn't talking too much. And he said, what's the matter, Clyde? And I told him, excuse my language, how in the hell did I get through all those red doors with all that security? Oh, he said, this is no problem for me. I said, no problem for you, how about me? He said, well, you're my guest. Well, I still don't understand why. He says, I'm in charge of security, and I can go anywhere. So he took me through the plant. And that's how I got to see it. So when I got in Los Alamos, and when Oppenheimer called me in the second day, wanted to know how I was living and if I enjoyed my accommodations and everything, and I said yes. And he said, that's when he told me he picked me out the second day. I says, well, let's go in, and I asked him why, and he says, I figured a farm boy would have a pretty clear sheet. And I said, well, I guess I did. But I said, I'm trying to figure out, no, he asked me, he says, do you have any idea, you've only been here 2 days, what we're doing here, or if we're making anything, or what it is? And I looked at him and I says, yes and no. I don't know whether now I should say anything or not. My best judgment is keep your damn mouth shut. And he says, that's right. But this is between you and I in this room, and there's nobody else here but you and I. And I picked you out, the second one. I'd like to know how good of a pick I made. And I proceeded to tell him, the reason I know that you're making a bomb is because I was through the torpedo plant in Alexander, Virginia, and I seen the whole work. So looking at that and seeing what the sergeant that I know said, he's down in the machine shop, and we put two together, and we decided that he thinks we're making a bomb, and so do I. He didn't say yes or no, but he says, I would often wonder, where you got your knowledge? Because then I'm 22. I got out of there when I was 24. So for a young kid, I've seen an awful lot of world. I've been involved in stuff that I didn't even know I was in until 2000, when I could talk about it. I knew I was in something bad, something real hot. And everybody shied away from me and looked around. My nickname among the rest of them is, look out for Clyde, he's radioactive, he glows at night in the dark. Well, I sometimes do, but it isn't like a light bulb. They tell me my skin gets a little bit white, and that's what they're calling glow. So that's another joke, but look out. Have you got any students here that's really bright and would like to answer a question? Don't be bashful. Well, I'd like to hear what you have to say, what you talk about among yourselves. Or have you not talked about it? Have they read it in the history book or whatever, science
I don't know
book?
how far, I'm a science teacher, so
Yeah.
I don't know how far they've got, if they've come up to the Second World War. And the
Because
Manhattan Project and
my impression for the last 5 years, it's been taught in a lot of high schools in their senior year.
well, these kids are sophomores. Most
Oh, so maybe that's coming up. Well, you ought to know whether you got this deal here or not. But anyway, it's growing, and the whole program in that category is even growing more than it was when it started out. And
Well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people, you know, that suffering that you and the others are going through is horrible, and that's a casualty, I guess, of the making of the bomb. But there's sure a lot of people that are sure happy that those bombs were dropped in Japan, because they don't feel they'd be here right now.
well, and thank you for bringing up the subject. There are approximately 213,000 that were killed from radiation. But there is another 200 and some thousand who were injured but are still alive in some category. And we got over 183,000 that are buried that we know of. The thing is, we do not have 10% of those eligible veterans who are out in the Pacific in 50, 60, and 70. We're trying to find them. I just talked to 2 this morning here, and they were in 51 and 52. And I told them, they didn't even know anything about it. So that's what I'm trying to do. I've been trying for 3 years. We got money from the National Association last year, $100,000, to travel to the United States, because every state has an atomic group, a commander, whatever. And we were going to go there and work those states, try to get TV and radio publicity, and let it be broadcast. And then if there is any veterans or family of veterans who are or were, you know, that can tell us that their son or father or whoever was, and get it on the list so we can have it as a list, because there is no list because it's all tied up. But we need it. And those veterans, it's on the federal regulations right now, from 50 on. There's all kinds of benefits for them, education, loans, you name it, go to this, do that, and hospitalization if you got any problems, whatever, you're treated royally. But that all depends if the hospital's got the facilities, and Portland doesn't have it. So a lot of them are still standing around waiting, and that's what they're kind of ticked off with. Well, you're only ticked off for a few things. I've been doing it for 65 years. They still don't know what's wrong. So anyway, I'm still here, and I still plan to be back for another 10 years, God willing. But maybe, I know by next year we'll have this documentary, and maybe between Ken and some others, maybe we can come back to school on another day, maybe a bigger room and a lot more of the senior class or the 2 upper grades or whatever to see this film. And maybe we can, I don't know what, well, I really don't know how much area size the picture we can produce. You know, whether the screen can be 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 or what, you know, and still be able to see it. The audio will be there, but I don't know whether we can get that much picture out of it. It'd probably be smaller where we take in groups of 200 or 300 at a time, or 4, you know. But it would be interesting to see that, because you will actually see, talking about it, you'll see the documents that it involves, the reading of the documents that I have here. I've got one here on R.J. Ritter, who's now the commander. I wish that I could read it. It's about 3.5 pages long, but it tells a real story. And I found that yesterday. I knew I had it, but I finally found it. I got so much stuff I can't find. But anyway, if you know any veteran, or hear of any veteran that was out in the Pacific, have them get a hold of me. All you have to do is talk to the teacher. Or my name is Clyde Wyant. You can talk to Ken Buckles or wherever. I live on Rothie Road, 4400 Southeast Rothie Road, just off from McLaughlin Boulevard, and the first trailer court is the senior trailer court. Very, very nice. Big wide streets, street lights, and they keep it all trimmed, and everything is in tip-top shape. The buildings are painted, the trailers and stuff. The yards and shrubbery and stuff are clear. But, and Rick Futman is just up the street. I'm supposed to be. Last year I was there, the first year. But they're later on. I don't know what it's going to be this week. I think it's next week that they'll probably call me. But I'm supposed to go to Rainier and Lebanon and McMinnville, but they're all going to be in next year, first part. So anyway, I enjoy coming here. I look forward to it. This uniform that I have on now is, believe it or not, is my drum corps uniform for Poston 1 that I played in for 19 years until we got a little bit too old to act. And I was there for 19 years, but it used to be a bright red jacketed, redder than that, and a blue pair of pants, but you can see it's all one color. And it's on my Legion uniform. And so Ken wanted me to wear it today. It's kind of heavy because it was made, we worked in many Rose Festival parades, and you've probably seen us many times, but to wear one of these things when it's 80 degrees out, it was sweated pretty hard in them. But anyway, this is the first time I've had it on in over 30 years. So,
We thank you for coming, Clyde.
I do too.